Finally, after a few not finally solved technical problems, I don't know why my Mac didn't want to do what I want. Maybe because I'm talking about artificial intelligence, I don't know. Uh, so don't worry if some words appear strangely designed. It's just because we don't have all the fonts on this Mac. So I'm probably the most non-tech person here in the room, and but I was interested in technology, and especially in artificial intelligences. I was like this, and it has been a long time ago because I grew up very fast. So one question here: who of you is a designer? Any designers? Okay. Any people considering themselves as working in the area of customer experience, user experience? More. That's good. Any developers? Of course. So for the developers who didn't raise the hand when I asked you if you work in the area of customer experience, I will try to convince you that you do, especially when it comes to this. So first, of course, okay, this one doesn't work as well. First, of course, my whole knowledge about artificial intelligence was, of course, based on science fiction movies and literature. And then I slowly moved into reading more serious stuff, like especially cybernetics, how it was actually initially called before artificial intelligence has become such a word. And at some point, exactly, and I studied sociology because I was always very curious about people, and that's probably why I became curious also about the artificial intelligence. Because I was always I'm a very introverted person. You might wonder because I'm staying on stage, but I was rather always, watching people and trying to understand their behavior without actually talking to them too much. So a kind of artificial intelligence sounds like a better solution for me. And like 10, 11 years ago, then I started working in the area of customer experience. And, my goal was to create awesome, great, usable, user-friendly products for people. And the first things I had to do was rather doing some damage control. And doing the technology at less frustrating. Because when I started working with clients and we did some user tests, for example, we heard like a lot of sentences like this: "Oh, don't worry, they will learn how to work how it works eventually after a product failed the user test." So it's not that it doesn't happen anymore. It's still sometimes happening in my consultant work. But meanwhile, like a user experience is kind of, everybody knows what you're talking about. They understand that it's important and so on. But now the expectations toward customer experience has really changed. Especially as like the technology is now everywhere. It's not like a productivity tool anymore it used to be. It's just in our life. And it is also so cheap, and that each and every product can be, can have screens and sensors and internet connection. So basically all things from toothbrush, shoes, shirts, traffic lights, everything can become a smart thing. And one of the most important factors in this change is actually the artificial intelligence. But let me first define what I mean with artificial intelligence. So there is, some of you maybe know the difference between strong UI and weak AI. Anyone here? Okay. So I will now talk about strong AI. Strong AI is, maybe some of you saw the Ex Machina, the movie, or maybe Hair, or maybe even Star Trek with Data. They were also kind of forms of strong AI, like an AI which is actually like overpowered the human in each and every area. What we have to do with most of the time is a specialized AI. You have probably rather to call it machine learning than AI, but AI sounds so much better and everybody is using it. But what we are talking about now is this weak AI, the specialized AI, like image recognition, like voice recognition, like personalization, and so on. Because when a strong AI comes to our life, then we will have probably much more to worry about or much more to talk about than just about its influence of the user experience design. So, machine intelligence or machine learning is, of course, not new. It has been for a while, but it becomes more and more sophisticated. And especially last year and this year, are characterized by a huge development in this area. So all these big companies, like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, IBM, Apple as well, but they are a little bit behind, are actually defined AI as their top strategic priority, a priority which will really determine the future of their organizations. And what's interesting about this is that what they're doing is they're not doing just for themselves. But as some of you might know, a lot of their developments are available to others and also open source, like TensorFlow, like parts of the IBM Watson, and so on. So that makes it so relevant. It's because now basically every little startup can actually profit from their development and make their own products smarter and use some elements of artificial intelligence in their products. So I think it's not just a trend, but it's actually going to be involved in more and more products. But some of you, especially those who don't see yourselves as designer or as a customer experience designer, might wonder, okay, why should the smart algorithms influence design that way? And why is it so? And I think it's getting like more and more connected, because this algorithm running in the back are more and more defining the way we're using the technology, and they are not perceived in their interaction, and that's actually their strength, because I, as a user, don't have to think how it works and what to do, because I'm just getting it from my anticipatory application. And so I think if done properly, the AI will have a huge relevance for user experience. But probably a lot of you or a lot of us as users, maybe not as developers who maybe think about it more, but we don't think that we have much of the AI or smart algorithms in our life already. Let's just take email. It's maybe not a great customer experience, but maybe you remember how many spam mails did you get like even 10 years ago or something. Whoever is using Google Mail basically don't get any spam. And it's not because the spammers gave up and said, okay, it's not worth it, we are not doing it, and the opposite is the case. But the algorithms are getting trained so well that they basically eliminate the spam out of our life. And the same is with user-generated content, which can actually be very crappy. But to us, like a lot of when you see it, Answers and Quora, or when you see some recipe websites and so on, why are you getting so great user-generated content with pictures and great grammar and so on? It's not but because people became so smart or because there is a editor sitting there and editing every post. It's because also their algorithms, of course, learned how to recognize better and better content. There is, of course, Google search with Google RankBrain, which became one of the most algorithms, and they actually also for complex questions now have better accuracy in their answers than actually human counterparts. And not to mention Facebook, who is more or less defining what we are seeing and based on the things we already clicked and looked through. And one example I want to share with you because it was very kind of scary, funny. That's my Amazon page. And most of the things are pretty much about what I'm reading, some UX and business and so on stuff. So I think, okay, that works. That's a great algorithm for me. I buy a lot of stuff. But then I saw this one. It says in German, this woman is obviously pregnant, and it says your baby wish list, all what you need in one list. For those who don't know me, I don't have kids. I'm not pregnant. I have never been. I don't plan to for now. And I didn't really search anything about this, So that's what makes me like, okay, I just turned 30. Do they want to tell me something? Is there a secret message there? Okay, so I really spent a lot of time thinking about it. I even, bought a pregnancy test to be really sure. Maybe they knew something I didn't know. But then I come to the conclusion it must be a mistake. But, I mean, maybe some of you heard the Target story, which didn't turn that well, because they actually really predicted the pregnancy based on buying stuff unrelated to pregnancy. So that's why I was saying about it. But that's actually pretty interesting how well you can, predict things and be anticipatory, But let's forget about this Amazon misfortune and let me show some things where anticipation actually works. So what I call anticipatory experiences. It's like, understanding from kind of not direct message, but from the preferences. So if I write to my boyfriend, hi darling, I'll be home about 8, I'm pretty tired and stressed out. So that would be what I expect. That would be an anticipatory experience. And that will not be that anticipatory experience, yeah? And, it's getting better, especially for the software. And, but I think, the learning process, machine learning process is way faster than the human learning process. So, okay. Oops. But they are already very small mini interactions that actually work in this predictive way. It, of course, doesn't work always, but I mean, I'm pretty able to write a lot of my SMS without actually typing almost anything. So that's how predictions might work quite good. Even there, I already had also some funny experience with this, because I wanted to write to my friend, do you want to see me tonight? And it's proposed, do you want to marry me? So I'm wondering how many people are actually proposing via SMS. That's I have to look at the statistics actually. Or of course, the calendar, which is also pretty basic, but where it's also quite an anticipatory experience when it sees a number, a date, or it sees tomorrow. It's basically automatically creates the URL when I can create an event. It's very easy. And then, of course, Google Now and Google Trips, which I actually used, for my trip to Oslo, which is actually without me doing anything. It's basically it's reading my emails, yeah. So that's kind of thing you might think about, but I wanted to try it out, so it knows where I'm going and making some proposals to me, the things I would like to do, and so on. And the same is with Google Now. I think 1 month ago or 2 months ago, it happened to me that I actually get the information about the delay of the Lufthansa flight from Google Now before I've got it from Lufthansa. So it was pretty crazy anticipatory experience, so that they are even faster than Lufthansa with delivering such information. Of course, there are I could show you examples like the whole day, but I want to talk about something else now. And I mean, maybe you realize, but all of these examples were our graphical user interface examples. And why is it wrong? Or is it wrong? Are there any other examples? I mean, meanwhile, we take GUI for granted. And probably, like not many people, or probably none in this room, can really remember a time before GUI. And that's why you think, okay, customer experience, screens. But, that's how the human-computer, human-machine interactions looked like 40 years ago. And we couldn't click and press buttons and have nice visual interfaces. So only like the people who really understood it were able to, and well trained to, were able to interact with the computers. And of course, it's changed, especially when it's basically, actually the GUI is almost exactly as old as I am. And it started only after Steve Jobs borrowed the idea from Xerox. And then Microsoft popularized this idea that everyone, especially in the Western world, was able to have the computer in their home. But what we forget about it maybe when we talk about GUI as a customer interface is that language is actually not our natural, language is actually our natural way of communicating. That's the way we interact with each other. That's the way we're evolutionarily prepared to interact with each other, and not by clicking through, many steps and strange forms and menus and inputs and so on. And everybody sees the limitation of graphical user interface when he or she has to book a flight, which sometimes can take like 18 steps, we really counted it, and at 10 different screens. And and especially if you do something more complex, like booking the whole travel, so you do go through many interfaces, do many steps, you get confused, you get frustrated. And especially if the screens are getting smaller and smaller, yeah? I mean, putting 18 steps on a big screen is kind of easy, but not in the small one. So that's what we designers started to focus on, to optimize the screens, to make the screens better and better. But what we sometimes forget is actually that the best interface is no interface. That we have to focus on the customer experience and not the screen experience. So this year, probably everybody heard, or maybe some of you already programmed some bots? Any bot experiences? Okay, not that many yet, but bots are the thing. And there is a reason for this. Maybe we cannot, call this year the year of no interface, but the conversational interface is a first very big step toward this. Especially as, written language is of course much easier to understand to the machines than mimics, gesture, and the spoken language. So that's probably the first natural step. So the great example for this is restaurant booking. When I want to make a reservation, or when I want to meet with Vitaly, for example, this evening, and with, I'm looking for some names, maybe Alexander, then what do I have to do? I have to send them mails or talk to them and ask them whether they are available and where. Then you have to choose the restaurant, then call them, make the reservation, and so on. So there are many different steps through many interfaces. But when I just have to send a message, please book me a restaurant with these two guys in my favorite restaurants after my last meeting, then basically this information is what I want to give there. So this conversational interface works actually as my assistant who knows me and who can actually collect all this data from all these different interfaces. But there is also a kind of a flaw to the bots. Reading is not very easy. It seems funny, but when I was reading the numbers, I was actually pretty amazed because 10 million Germans, 10 million Germans Germans are 80 million, including the infants, but 10 million grown-up Germans are actually functionally illiterate. What does it mean? That they went to school to learn to read and to write, but they actually unlearn it due to the lack of usage. And I mean, Germany is a highly educated country with a very low illiteracy rate. So when it's in Germany like this, you can imagine how it's in different countries. So we are not equipped, reading is very young in our evolution. I mean, we started reading basically as a whole society like 100, 200 years ago. So we are not used to this. And so obviously the next step is to eliminate the necessity of reading for us, especially in the human-computer interaction. And you still made laugh about Siri. I come to this why it's like this in few moments. And of course it's not perfect, but it has an important pioneering role, and all the major players followed with their own national language processing assistant that incorporate many AI components. Like, for example, Alexa, which also doesn't always work that well, especially if you have an Alex in the office, because every time I engage in a conversation with Alex, Alexa wants to join the conversation as well, and it's sometimes saying just some random things. But it's, of course, it's as the development is exponential, I can imagine that they will be so much better in just a few months. And what's interesting about Alexa, but also about Barbie, which is also kind of acting as an artificially intelligent assistant to your kid and has a lot of artificial intelligence in it, they don't even have screens. So you interact with something there, with a software, which is completely screenless. And I think that's especially that's removing a lot of limitations from the technology, because when you think about wearables, I mean, it's not really easy to work with the Apple Watch with this mini screen, and also about smart fashion and home automation. It will be working so much better when you just remove the screen. And next in this trend are, of course, the hearables. You might have seen the movie Hair, but it's, of course, also not science fiction anymore. You have quite a few hearables now at the market, like the Sony Xperia Ear, which is basically lets you do a lot of the tasks just with this small device without any involvement actually of your smartphone device. And then the next step is when it actually also is able to translate. I mean, now we are all here speaking so many different languages, and for some it's maybe still kind of difficult. And how would be possible with how different would be the interaction when we were actually immediately be able to understand what the other person is telling us in their language. And but what is still most frustrating and strange about these virtual assistants like Siri, like Alexa, like all of them, it's when you interact with someone, a person, one of the most important things that make the experience, the interaction enjoyable is actually the empathy. It's not just I hear what you say and I answer. Is I hear what you say, I hear how you say it, I hear how fast you say it, and I see how your gestures are, how your mimics is. And I can recognize if you're frustrated, if you're in a bad mood, if you don't have time, if you're confused. And based on this all emotions, I can change the way I'm communicating. That's something which doesn't really yet happen with the virtual assistants. They only understand that we're angry when we start swearing, for example. When you start swearing, then Siri will answer in an appropriate fashion, but it doesn't understand the tone of your voice. And there are actually not that many possibilities yet to actually implement this. Microsoft has actually started, it even exists as an API, so you can use it, that they are understanding emotions from the pictures, from the faces of the people. So that might be next step to, to combine this with the recognition of language and to make this assistance, way more emphatic. But maybe we don't even need this because, maybe we can very fastly go the next step ahead. So why should we bother about recognizing language and emotions and gestures when we can basically directly interact with the machines with our brain? And it maybe sound like, especially when you look at this picture, it can sound a little bit creepy, but it's not science fiction anymore as well. When you look at prosthetics, for example, they are basically computers which are coordinated by your brain, which are directly connected to your brain. And there were also some very silly or interesting, but sound a little bit silly examples of like thought-controlled cars. When you think, okay, we will have self-driving cars. We have self-driving cars now, so maybe we don't need like thought-controlled driving. But if you combine self-driving with thought-controlled driving, that would be pretty interesting. And of course, there are even competitions in thought-controlled drones, which you can see there. So people are sitting there and basically thinking, and the drones are going. So if you can do this, that's might be kind of terrifying for the designers who are especially focusing on, designing nice screens when you see what is already possible and where we don't even need any kind of interface, almost any kind of interface. So let me talk a little bit about the designers and how the job of the designer is evaluating. I mean, the people who are there in this area for a while know, okay, we had been screen designers, web designers, mobile designers, UI designers, UX designers, all these different designers. But how it will change in a few years. According to this NPR, will your job be done by the machine? It says that graphic designers have just an 8.2% chance of being automated, while for developers is 48%. But I still think that we might be a little optimistic here, especially like for many tasks of a designer. The job of the designer is not always fun and very creative. Like any one of you designers probably had at some point designed like advertising banners in like 120 formats and resolution. So creative and so fun. And or scaling images for different mobile devices and so on. So I think a lot of people will be happy or are happy when these parts of the job can be done by the machine. But it's not only this. For example, user research is being also automated more and more. So you don't have to just, be creative and think of, how can we design it so that people will will like it, but we actually pretty much can automate this and get all this validated and analyzed without actually us doing a lot, just preparing some framework, and everything else is getting done by the machine. So, that's again about screens. But how could the job of a designer evolve when the interaction between humans and machine become more implicit? And I think the quote by Steve Jobs, that design is not just what it looks and feels like, and how it works, has never been like this present and this important. And that actually the jobs of designers and developers are more and more melting together, because now designers design how it looks like, and developers define how it works. But it's become more and more like one thing. And if you still say, okay, but the computers, the machines cannot be so creative, then you can look at Google Deep Dream, which created a whole art exhibition just created by the machine, or music pieces, which are also created by machines now. You can't hear it? Okay, we can't hear it. Okay, just imagine that's a rocky, music piece created by the machine. So it happens already. So machines are also getting creative. And, I don't want to get too much in a philosophical discourse with myself here. If you want, there's a party tonight, and over a few conversation supporting liquids, we can definitely discuss this stuff, because there is so much about artificial intelligence, and especially about the future, about going towards super intelligence, which just doesn't fit here, because I just took one small piece of it. But for all the people who still say, okay, it's a hype, whatever, it will pass. You shouldn't be too scared, or you shouldn't think too much. I just recently saw an article about Google from 15 years ago, and an article about internet from 30 years ago, and they were all saying, oh no, this hype, it's just, especially the internet, it's just for a few creeps sitting in their rooms and not getting out, and it will all pass. And I think the same is with artificial intelligence. As you see, just alone at Google, there are more than 1,000 scientists working just on artificial intelligence. And it's getting more and more into all products, so that you basically cannot think most of digital products without machine learning, without artificial intelligence. And I was once asked, so where is it going? Do you have kind of a future prognosis? And I say it's very difficult to make a future prognosis about AI, because the development is not linear, and it's very difficult for us to think like this, because our lives are very linear. But the best example is, when I tell you, please take 30 steps, 30 single steps, then you know that I will be somewhere there. But if I ask you to take 30 exponential steps, so just multiplying by 2, so 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on, where will you be then in 30 steps? Anyone has a guess? 30 steps? It's 26 times around the world. So, and when you think about this development, it's very difficult to predict the future. But what I think is just, the AI probably will not be like this. That's the image of AI you get when you type it into Google image search or Shutterstock or whatever. So that's AI, that's not AI. That's a creepy Android graphic, whatever. I think AI, at least for now, will be rather like this. It will be implicit. It will be just existing in our world. And what happens next when it goes towards superintelligence, that I just don't know. Thank you.